Hello, everybody. My name is Sil, the DM, and today I'm going to be bringing you the recap for my Ixalan Dungeons & Dragons campaign for the week of December 16th, I believe it was, loosely titled A Leap of Faith. To pick up where we were last time, our adventuring group Shura, Pelennor, Alani, Osaha, Famine, and the NPCs who were with them at the time were attempting to return back to their ship, the Vaga de Oro, with a hearty amount of gold and a slew of magical items, when they came under an ambush from the River Heralds, a great many of merfolk in the river behind them and spread out through the forest on either side, the jungle, as it were. At this point, the party began to row extremely fast and extremely hard. And because no one's like extremely good at this sort of long distance rowing except for the NPCs, it was a little anticlimactic to let the NPCs control it, but the players still managed to interact, either hurling spells or taking range shots at the merfolk who were chasing them, or Osaha, who casted enhanced abilities on Aleshta, the woman rowing her boat, to give her advantage on strength, skill checks, and saving throws, that kind of thing. So they pushed on hard. Shura, remembering the layout of the map, decides that they're not going to take the same exit out, knowing that there's a pretty good chance the merfolk are going to be able to cut them off if they try to take that bend. Instead, he elects to order them to go through another path, one they haven't taken yet. Because the river on this island is almost like a big U, where you have to go down one part of the U and around the bend, and then up the other part of the U to get to where they were. Because of the elevations and everything, you can't really easily scale the cliffs that lead up to the temple that they had gotten to. However, in the upper part of the U's bend, there's actually another river, a sort of fork in the road that leads off towards the ocean. Uh, and they hadn't gone down that path, but it was very clear on the maps that they had stolen from the merfolk, the River Heralds that they had killed before, that this map would have, this island would have this river, basically. Shura informed everyone that that was the route they were going to take, and they pushed on. Uh, as they came around the bend, they did see the area in front of them get cut off by River Heralds, and had they continued going around the bend with their original route, they would have had to fight their way through some of them, which might have slowed them down enough for the others to catch up. Because at this point, it was getting pretty close. However, they decided to push on, take the new fork, and trust in Shura's judgment. As they were pushing, some people were struggling. At first, Bardov was doing very good, and Aleshta was doing very poorly. Then, with the enhanced ability, Aleshta started to really outperform, and then Ernesto, the person rowing on Shura's boat, started to slow down. And that was when we rolled a natural one for Ernesto. And I had a list of potential, like, serious issues that would arise, because I'm just that kind of person. In the, what's the word I'm looking for? In the occasion that someone would, or in the event, that's it. God damn my brain. In the event of a natural one during this sort of chase scene, this chase encounter, I had a list of a few possible things that could have been the issue. So they were like gaining multiple levels of exhaustion because they were rowing multiple hours worth of distance in minutes instead of hours. Like they had gone probably 4 hours worth of regular travel at a leisurely pace, but like at a full sprint. The people rowing were really starting to get fucked up. So one of them rolling a 1 could either have multiple different possibilities. The ship could have get attacked. They could have attracted attention of dinosaurs. They could have attracted something in the water. The Merfolk could have had an ambush waiting for them ahead at the other river. And and there was just a whole slew of things. And I rolled what was arguably the worst result on that chart, which was a heart attack. Basically, the stress and the physical strain, and the fact that these are pirates, they're not healthy people for the most part. Uh, they eat enough stuff to avoid scurvy, but it's also a lot of fat and a lot of starch and a lot of just not super healthy carbs. And though they live a fairly active life, it's that builds up on the body, and when you add in all the stress and the wounds of the last part of the journey, I was like, I could totally see someone in this high stress situation having a heart attack, like just fucking having a heart attack. And you might say, still, this is a fantasy setting. If you're gonna work in things like strokes or heart attacks or high blood pressure, like you're making things too real, man. You're taking the fantasy out of the fantasy, and like, I don't know. I get that. I, I would pose that as the DM, I get to choose what fits in the fantasy setting or not, and when it fits. But like, I don't like the idea of just everyone in a fantasy setting being immune to real life problems, because I think fantasy and Dungeons and Dragons is a great place to explore those real life problems from a level of safety where we can explore the stress and everything causing someone to have a heart attack without, having to see someone go through a heart attack. It wasn't even a player, it was an NPC. We have to keep this in mind as well. Especially in the Ixalan campaign, I'm keeping my charts pretty harsh, especially for this part of this journey, because there were fucking like 9 NPCs with them, and the odds that the players were the ones who were going to end up on the end of something harsh were slim. Now, if one of the players was rowing here, and they rolled a 1, there was a chance they would have had a heart attack. But that didn't happen, so I don't really feel bad about having it happen. And how a heart attack works in this campaign, I at least, is the way I wrote out the rules. Your health drops immediately to 0, and you fail 2 death saving throws. Uh, However, because Ernesto had been struggling trying to push on, and this happened, the 2 other boats, the only boats with magical healers, were over 100 feet ahead, and they had no way of knowing what was going on with Ernesto. And the 2 people in the boat with him, Orson and my character, Shura, also had no idea. Orson rushed up to try and help as best he could, and Shura just took over the oars, just trying to get them there. Shura managed to roll okay enough to catch up in the next round, and everyone else was a little panicked, but unfortunately, Ernesto failed his death saving throw before that boat got back to the rest, and he died. I wasn't planning for this. It really took me off guard that this had happened. I actually had a moment where I had to sit there and X his name out of his character sheet and just go, shit, I wasn't planning for this. I was going to use that character for things later. Alright, fill in the void, improv it up, just keep going. Uh, so, Osaha, when seeing the pallid, inert hand clutching his chest, Ernesto with Orson busily trying to work over him, did throw a healing word his way to no effect, because he was dead. And Osaha still didn't know that, but Osaha is also someone who's done a lot of healing in recent days and knows when the spell doesn't work, just by sight, basically. At this point, they notice that the boat exited not into the ocean, the river, sorry. I think I just said the boat. The river empties into a very small lake. Barnov, who had rolled like his 3rd natural 20 for rowing or some shit, just crashed his boat into the shore. The little rowboat, he just could not slow it down in time, and they just bucked off. Osaha's ship landed a bit gentler. Shura and Orson landed their ship, and while everyone else got out to keep running, because Shura was calling to keep running, keep heading straight south, get to the coast, they were just taking his orders and running. Uh, and a few of them who have particularly high perceptions noticed Shura and Urson speaking to each other in the boat, looking at Ernesto, and the two of them realized that he was dead and made the decision to leave him behind. So they hopped into the boat and took off, leaving the body of Ernesto in the rowboat. Because, well, one, they're pirates, and two, like, yeah, no, leave no man behind, but also, I don't want to die. Uh, I would say, but apparently some of our players are less inclined to keeping themselves alive. Because the merfolk were catching up. Especially now that they were on foot and moving significantly slower, the River Heralds, who are much better at traversing the dense jungle, were catching up on them pretty quickly. And it was at this point, as the group was pulling ahead, uh, Pellinor and Pellinor alone noticed that Orson had stopped running. He started slowing down, and he looked panicked and almost crazed. Uh, and then he stopped completely as everyone else kept running. Pellinor decided to run back to him. She ran back to Orson and grabbed his arm and tried to pull him along, and he looked frightened. Like, he looked like he was scared shitless. And eventually he yelled that he couldn't and took off perpendicular to the crew, running a different way. Pellinor, not understanding what was going on, tried to tackle him, to pin him down and get him to go the right way. Uh, but I don't know if you know this about Pellinor, our ranger. Uh, she's Dex, and like, not strong at all. So the idea of her even trying to tackle one-armed Orson, who, though not particularly strong, is just stronger than she is and has training in athletics. Uh, because again, I have they all the NPCs have level in special NPC classes I make, which give them the ability to be good at certain skills that are relevant to their characters, and even good at defending themselves, but not nearly as skilled as the PCs who have devoted combat classes. But Pellinor flopped completely on the tackle and went prone. Orson kept running off at like a 90-degree angle from the party, and Pellinor decided to chase after him. The River Heralds, noticing a split in the party, sent a large group after the two who had ran off to the side. And Pellinor ended up tripping and falling, going prone, and sort of curled up and hid in a bush as the River Heralds ran past, chasing after Orson. Pellinor heard a bit of a scuffle and some cries, and then silence. And Pellinor decided that she was going to, like, take some shots at the River Heralds to try and distract them from Orson, or who she believed for some reason was still trying to run away. Uh, but they didn't actually notice the bolts because they were really focused on carefully approaching and investigating Orson, who they had just dropped. Uh, and then Pellinor eventually realized what I was describing to them. It's this odd thing where Pellinor's player just occasionally has attention sort of spaciness. It happens, especially where you're playing online. I find that sometimes players just have a harder time visualizing what's happening around them. This will actually come up later in the city recap, which will be uploaded shortly after this one, like almost at the same time, probably, since I'm recording them back to back. But with all of the internet at your fingertips, and like just there is a distraction, and just, some people just not having very good attention spans to begin with. Uh, they sometimes people don't pick up on the clues I'm trying to work into the narrative because they're just not picking it all up. So Pellinor kept like suggesting riskier and riskier things that were definitely going to get the player killed because they were acting under the assumption that Orson was still up and running away. And eventually Pellinor got into a better position where she could see that Orson was just down and that they had him and that there were like 15 of them. At which point, Pelennor finally decided to give up and run away before engaging 15 merfolk and just instantly dying. Pelennor managed to catch up to the other group before the River Heralds, since a lot of them had sort of slowed down while the party split. And at the time Pelennor caught up to them, they were at the coastline, which is a 40-foot high, almost sheer rocky cliff. Uh, they could see the Vaga de Oro off in the distance, uh, at the southern tip of the island. Because again, they were supposed to sort of dip out into the south after going through the rivers to get back to the original island. So the ship would probably still be in the area, and it was. It was actually like 350 feet away from the coastline, which was unfortunately a bit further than any of their traditional spells could reach. Um, to let them know they were there, and the River Heralds were still coming. And now that the group that had taken out Orson, who was now dead, he was dead when Pelennor saw him, but they didn't have any confirmation of that. Uh, they had regrouped basically. They had carefully inspected the body, took whatever they wanted, or left a few people with it, and had regrouped with the main hunting party. And it was getting pretty tight when Shura looked to Osaha and told his partner, his IMO, I don't know the position of their relationship is ever tenuous to me, and I'm very interested to see what happens with it. Not to let Bardov drown, basically, and then he ran and jumped over the side of the cliff. And everyone else followed suit, except Osaha and Alani walked Bardov to the edge, and he looked over the edge, and really didn't want to do it. He was like, what, there's only probably 25 merfolk, we can handle this. Because, again, as we know from earlier in the campaign, Bardov, the orc, can't swim. Um, he's not dumb. He just never learned how to swim very well, and he's a bit of a sinker, especially because he wears some decent-ish gear. At which point, Alani and Osa sort of took him arm in arm and walked him off the edge. And Bardov, like, actually rolled really high on his wisdom check to not panic. Like, he rolled like a 21, which wisdom is not his strong suit. So instead of panicking, I had Bardov just sort of lock up so that he would be easy for Osaha and Shura to sort of guide to the surface. And as Shura jumped, he released a twin burst of Eldritch Blast towards the ship, just to try and have the two bolts arc out and then hit each other to try and create a flash of light. And it seemed to work. Either the cries from the coastline or the spells, for whatever reason, they don't quite know, the ship seemed to notice them. And the ship set off very quickly. The sails were unfurled, the anchor was raised, and it moved into a position to come pick them up a little bit quicker. And that's when the River Heralds got to the top of the cliff and began casting spells and shooting bows and like shooting arrows at the party in the water. And the ship, the Vaga de Oro, got its broadside towards the coast and just started unloading cannons at the River Heralds, who very quickly got the message and buggered off. At which point, the crew of the adventure party, minus Ernesto and Orson, who at this point were both dead, got to the ship and were pulled up, and people were at first very excited that they were back, and then very concerned when they noticed who was missing. The captain, of course, showed a fair bit of concern, but once Osaha brought up how much, like, the fact that they had a lot of gold, you know that the captain sort of snapped back into reality. Because while the captain is a good man for the most part, and he does care about his crew, if he's going to lose two of his most valued crew members, the Cooper's apprentice and the Scribe's apprentice, he's just hoping for a good payday out of this, basically, to make it worth it. And as this is happening, the party is noticing that there's someone new on the ship, who's off to the side, sort of under the arm of Back Galley. the blonde, very handsome recruiter who had got most of them their jobs on the ship. He was sort of holding on to this strangely dressed figure who didn't really look like a normal member of the crew. And the crew, the adventuring party, uh, turned over the gold, the bag of holding they found full of gold and magic items, and the captain was already doing math and like seemed to be fairly over Ernesto and Orson's death. It definitely felt like the amount of gold, the raw gold and magical items they found were worth it. Uh, and was looking around. Palador and Sea Swift arrived at the crow's nest and managed to land up there. And again, the party noticed that there was a bit of tension on the ship towards this newcomer. Because, unbeknownst to the players, until about this time, we were getting a new player. One of Alani's real life friends, wanted to join in a different new campaign I was starting, but we couldn't make that schedule work, so I asked if they would like to play in this one, as like a surprise to Coop and them. Unfortunately, it was kind of ruined because I sort of screwed up the surprise right at the end. Uh, but they weren't knowing who it was, so it was still a good reveal. So at this point, the crew basically spent their time interacting with the other crew members, making sure everyone was okay. At one point, Adolfo, uh, the Minotaur Cooper, who was Ernesto's master, the master Cooper of the ship, came up because everyone was causing a bunch of racket on the deck, and discovered that Ernesto wasn't there and had a bit of an emotional moment and excused himself to go back inside. And over the course of the rest of the session, the group spent most of their time just role playing little activities. Uh, and it was at this point that the captain asked Shura, who again was fairly tired and exhausted at this point, to see if their new potential shipmate was worthy of the captain's trust. And I do have art of them. There they are. Don't they look awesome? Uh, so Shura took this new character, who again is a player in the chat with us. So odds are they're going to be found at least worthy to stay on the ship. Uh, Down to his personal room. Uh, Along the way, they spoke with Zarg, the orc chef, who is the head cook, and some of his apprentices. Alani, of course, went to go speak with him for a bit because Alani views Zarg as like a third surrogate father, uh, because that's just Alani's business. But the rest of the crew, for the most part, just sort of crashed because they were pretty fucking tired. Shura met this new character, Hadwin, and they spoke for a while about who Hadwin was while Hadwin was here, and what's going to happen to Hadwin if they don't prove that they are trustworthy or useful or can be a member of the crew. And Hadwin explained that they were from the Sun Empire, the other human faction in Ixalan. Uh, but a political tomfoolery around their family basically got their family put into a position where their father was going to be killed, and potentially the rest of the family for being unable to complete a task that they were set, which was impossible. And how that his father had given him uh, a bit of gold and a boat, a little rowboat, like a little dinghy, and just gave him the chance to get away because that was his son and that's what he wanted to do. And he had ended up bumping into, after being at sea for several days and almost getting out of supplies, the Vaga de Oro, waiting beneath these three islands. And the pirates had took the hefty bag of gold he had, and just as they were holding him for questioning, that was when the party got back. So after hearing his story and understanding what was going on with him, Shura explained to Hadwin the situation, and the two seemed to hit it off quite well. And he took Hadwin back up to the captain, explained that Hadwin was a bit of an alchemist and a tinkerer, and definitely someone who could prove useful for the ship, and that Shura believed that they could trust Hadwin. Uh, and the captain took Shura at his word and welcomed Hadwin as a new member to the crew. And over the next few days, it was mostly just light role playing for the most part. Just catching up with NPCs they hadn't seen in a while. Uh, Shura and Osaha were spending the nights together, which was different. They didn't spend it talking very much though, as Osaha still wasn't really ready to bite the bullet, as it were, and Shura also was not ready to have any of these sort of conversations that need to happen. During the several days on the trip back to High and Dry, Shura did get permission from the captain to divvy out the magic items that they had found. Osaha took the raven statue, Alani took the necklace, Famine took the hand crossbow, the magical hand crossbow, and through all this, Shura had somehow managed to get the beaded necklace that Pellinor had. This happened earlier when Pellinor jumped off the crow's nest. They had sort of stumbled and dropped the necklace because they were going to go take it and give it to the captain as loot. Hadwin had actually noticed this, but Pellinor didn't see where the necklace went. But it landed by Hadwin and McGalley. McGalley, being a pirate, seeing a random jade-looking necklace, just picked it up and pocketed it. And told Hadwin he'd return it to his owner, and Hadwin, being a little naive, just went, alright, no worries. However, Hadwin wasn't the only one to see it. Shura saw it as well. So after dealing with the captain, Shura spent a little bit of time skulking around that galley and ended up stealing the necklace back. Just picking it out of his pocket one day. Because Shura's a rogue, and he's actually not bad at doing that sort of thing. He just rarely does it. Now, that all sort of happened off camera, because while Shura's a player character, technically it's my player character, I don't know. It would seem weird for me to vocalize what he's doing in the background if it doesn't involve the other members of the party. And maybe that's wrong. Maybe I should be doing that. Leave your opinions on that in the comments below. I have a feeling my players in this campaign would be like, yeah, no, definitely tell us what that bastard's up to. But, like, it seems weird to just narrate what a random NPC is doing, or a random character is doing that none of them are noticing is happening. Hadwin spent a bit of time meeting a lot of the members of the crew, and actually ended up meeting Adolfo, the sort of emotionally hurt, lonely Cooper, whose apprentice was killed in the recent venture. And Hadwin, being an artificer, was very taken with the Cooper and just his little office, his workshop of tinkering, where they do repairs to the ship and make barrels and do upkeep. And so Hadwin ended up spending a lot of time there and actually started to fit pretty naturally into the ship. And after a few days of travel, we were at the point where we're about a day away from High and Dry, and Osaha woke up in the bed that he had been sharing with Shura to notice that Shura was gone. And with Osaha running around the ship, looking everywheres, including in the water around the ship, Osaha couldn't find Shura. And that's where we ended the campaign. Or ended the session, sorry. The campaign's not over. So I'm really interested to see what's next. I'm very happy that we have a new human with us. A human artificer. Super cool. I'm excited to see what Hadwin can do and how this all plays out when we get back to High and Dry. It's all just super exciting. If you have any questions, comments, inquiries, or opinions, please hit them up in the comments below. I'd be happy to read them and interact. I want to thank you. If you do enjoy, hit the like button, share with friends. Just trying to, have fun with these recaps. Happy holidays.